The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more.
It's really a call to action. I mean, just to bring it full circle to where we started, we all have these sites in our communities and they are often overlooked, but we should be telling our communities to go out there and develop them. And, there are companies like AC Power and others that want to help build community-driven clean energy projects.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our hosts Tim Montague and John Weaver bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, developing solar on brownfields and landfills in particular. I'm Tim Montague. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour. Please check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review, and tell a friend about the show. My guest today is Annika Colston. She is the president and founder of a company called AC Power based in New York, but working in a handful of states across the East Coast and the Midwest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm so delighted to be here.
You might be wondering, how do C&I solar PPAs get financed? For many, it remains a mystery. For others, there's Conductor. Conductor Solar helps hundreds of developers and EPCs find investors, close transactions, and collaborate effectively. With competitive bids from high-quality partners, Conductor makes sure you and your customers get the best PPA deal every time. Free to use for developers and EPCs? Visit conductor.solar today. I'm unusual because my father is a landfill expert, and so I grew up learning about the challenges that landfills present for humanity. But a good thing happened, right? And we can repurpose landfills now as solar fields. And the expression we use in the industry is brownfields to Brightfields. It's a great expression. But tell our listeners, Annika, how you came to the landfill industry and then to the solar industry.
That's great. I would be happy to. And I imagine that my children will be able to relate to what you said about your dad, because, it all started with like drives to, the in-laws house or whomever, and you see, pointing out landfills off the road. And some people don't even notice them, but once you have them pointed out, it's,
Yep.
Now my kids are pointing them out to me. So
they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. That's true. So I've been developing renewable energy projects since the late 90s. Always been drawn to kind of the underdog project. So looking at technologies that are viable, but what kind of projects need a little extra push in order to get them developed. And so in 2015, I sold a portfolio of landfill gas to energy projects. And these were small scale projects that weren't regulated by the EPA or required to install emission reduction systems. So they were voluntary systems and would contribute to climate change emission reductions. And many of those sites were on declining gas curves, and there wasn't going to be a long-term interest for electricity. So I sold that portfolio and was looking at what to do next. And many of my colleagues were developing solar projects, and I knew that was a great place for developers to focus at that time. But I couldn't find my underdog angle. And then it dawned on me, all of those sites that I'd gone to visit that just didn't have enough gas and had been properly closed, but were still regulated, who still presented a financial burden to their owners, still had 25, 35 years of post-closure maintenance, those sites were just sitting there as beautiful, excellent candidates for solar. And so I founded AC Power in 2017 to focus exclusively on repurposing low value land, in particular sites that had been previously contaminated, into revenue generating solar facilities.
Yeah, it's until you really start to look for landfills or recognize the pattern of what they look like, you don't realize how many there are. And I live over an aquifer called the Muhammad Aquifer here in central Illinois, which is a wonderful resource of really clean drinking water for only a limited geography here in central Illinois. If you go an hour south, you're no longer over the aquifer and you have to pipe in good water from the Muhammad Aquifer. Many communities buy water from other communities and move it around here in central Illinois. But there's over 100 landfills on top of the Muhammad Aquifer. And you can think of a landfill as a bathtub, okay? And it's got a liner generally, depending on when it was built. But it's like a bathtub, and then you fill it with garbage, and then you put a cap on top, and you hope that the cap remains intact and sheds water off the top. But the reality is that the second law of thermodynamics guarantees that this bathtub is going to fall apart and it's going to leak, and water's going to get in and it's going to leach out through the bottom. Even if it has a leachate collection system, that system is going to be imperfect. So anyway, landfills are a threat to drinking water, among other things. And you generally can't do much with a closed landfill, right? It's a small mound of earth. I mean, it could be hundreds of acres or just a few acres. They vary in size. My first commercial solar project that I walked was the closed landfill in Urbana. Shout out to Scott Tess, who's the sustainability director for the city. And now there is a lovely community solar array on that landfill, which is providing green electrons to low and middle income residents of Champaign County. So it's a wonderful way to repurpose a landfill, which you otherwise really can't do anything with. But Annika, tell us about landfill solar. Where does it work, and how does it work? Because it doesn't work everywhere. And why are you working in the geographies that you're working in? And then, if you would, tell us a little bit about those states that you're working in.
Yeah, Tim, you're absolutely right about the sheer volume of potential sites. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory estimates that there is at least 13 million acres available for solar development, and that there's over 10,000 closed landfills that could generate up to 63 gigawatts of solar electricity. So the market is huge. It really does come down to where is it viable to develop these projects? And there are additional costs that go into developing solar on landfills. So they are not apples to apples with a ground mounted traditional system or a rooftop system. So one of the most important things for us is to be working in states that either offer an incentive directly for landfill solar development, or to be working in a state that has community solar. And so the reason why those two programs, either an incentive or a community solar program, help is because they provide sufficient incentives to make these projects economic. So in a community solar program, the revenue that a solar project receives is based on the residential rate and some discount that you're providing to the end users, as well as in most cases an incentive that's offered by the state. So that's the structure in Illinois, which has a fantastic community solar program and a lot of landfill solar under development. The other states that have similar programs are New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, and there are a handful of others that are prioritizing landfill solar development. But I think what is interesting to look at the evolution of how these programs come to be is that generally a state government decides that they want to promote solar. So they put in place a target, a renewable energy target and a program, and they say we're going to become, 30 or 50% renewable by 2050 or some kind of goal. And they put a program in place to support that. And, as soon as there's mention of a solar program, all of the solar developers, want to migrate immediately to that state because they see this opportunity, and it's a bit of a land grab at that point to find the best sites for solar. And that solar siting boom usually it happens before the local municipalities have figured out how to even deal with the demand that is coming for the solar energy. So in places like New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York State that were early movers, they saw this drive toward turning farmland or agricultural land into solar. And now, I am not an expert to talk about agrivoltaics or all of the advances that have been made, but just looking back over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of advancements, but there's been a lot of resistance and uncertainty around how to convert this land into solar and what that means. And so these states, as in response to that, decided to put in at the state level some siting requirements to incentivize the reuse of low value land like landfills into solar projects, so that areas that were sitting there as great candidates were able to get reused. And so we, encourage states that are considering a solar program in the future to incorporate those siting requirements and where they want solar to be situated early on, and encourage development of these sites.
So let's walk through this process of, you mentioned the land grab, like when a market first takes off, like Ohio is on the tail end of that land grab right now. They don't have a robust community solar market yet, but the writing is on the wall that they are going to. And so the developers are acquiring site control. When you go to a landfill owner, many of them are owned by government entities, but there's both, and I would imagine, some private, some public. Mm-hmm. What is that process like? Because most landfill owners are probably not familiar with landfill solar here in the Midwest. Maybe there are places in New York and New Jersey where landfill owners are more used to that now because the industry has been developing landfill solar for a longer period of time. But what is that like? And then how does that play out? And, in a good market, so to speak, what percentage of landfills do you think will ultimately get solarized?
Yeah, great questions. I think that it is a bit unfortunate how the kind of markets do develop. And so, we are seeing that. Ohio is a great example because I think that the kind of land grab happened over the last couple of years. And I think there's still a lot of uncertainty around whether a program will be approved or how soon. And I think we're now seeing this in Michigan, which had quite a lot of legislation around community solar, but now it, has kind of stalled in the 11th hour. And that's unfortunate because it puts a little bit of a bad reputation. Intentions are good to go in and get an option agreement, but if there are not the economics to support a project, developers can't put in the hundreds of thousands and eventually millions of dollars that are required to develop and construct the project. So I think we look for sites that are usually over 25 acres of a developable area. And just to give a rule of thumb, a 1 megawatt of solar is roughly 4 to 5 acres. Can be less, but on a landfill, you usually have other kind of things that you need to work around, like wells and just setbacks and roads. And so 25 acres of ideally flat So landfill, so you want a slope that's less than 20%. That hasn't been sufficient technology really to figure out how to put racking onto a steep slope. I think it's a great opportunity in the future. And there are many, many more megawatts that could be installed once somebody puts in place some technology that can be kind of guaranteed and it's financeable. And then we look to enter into an agreement with the host or the landlord that will allow us to complete the initial due diligence. Like any other solar project, you need to ensure that there's interconnection capacity and it's feasible. And then you're looking at the permitting, which is obviously much more extensive for a landfill solar project. But if you're working with a municipality, they're usually working hand in hand with them on the design and those approvals. I think another thing that developers don't realize is such an issue with these landfill sites and other contaminated sites is title. So we, 9 out of 10 times our projects run into some sort of title issue. And I think that it's mainly because these sites, date back to the 60s or earlier, or, and it was this kind of like, that's the town dump mentality. And it was like, oh yeah, just put the dump over there, right? And so in terms of like tax lots and access and easements, they weren't well documented. And there was a lot of transfers of ownership. And so when when the title commitment comes along and they're doing these title reports, 9 out of 10 times we aren't able to get legal access or there's not clean title. And so we've become, experts in that field for sure, and resolved this in some ways by having an affiliated company who is able to take title to the underlying property. And so I think that that's a really interesting opportunity for municipalities and the public entities who have these blighted properties that do not produce property taxes. They may have liens. They may be an eyesore. They're overgrown, and they're just really a detriment to the community. And we can come in and improve the site and generate revenue for the town through, future property taxes. And if it's a community solar project, you can bring the community solar, the local renewable energy to the residents, and in offering a discount on the electricity and engaging the low and moderate income subscribers.
On that note about title, check out my interview with Monroe Jett of Title Leader. He is an expert in title work and has created a wonderful platform to expedite securing title documents for solar development. So if you're a solar developer, check out Title Leader. But you mentioned this, the problems that can arise with titles. And then my understanding is you have to do what's called curative work to correct that. Paint us a picture though, Annika. Can you usually get the work done and move forward, or what is your success rate there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are committed to our projects, possibly to a fault. We like to overcome the challenges that are associated with these projects. And we had a project come online recently in Old Bridge, New Jersey, that was on a Superfund site that had, no owner, and it was basically a part of a defunct partnership. And there were, when we initially reached out to the group that was responsible for the Superfund site, they said, sure, we'd love to talk to you about solar. There's just 3 small issues. There's no title, there's no owner, there's no legal access. And, we need to have, 30 or so folks on the group that is responsible for the Superfund site to all agree on how to move forward and, work with the EPA.
Right.
So it was quite a feat to work with all of the groups to move it along. But I think what really struck me as the single most important thing that to measure success was having a champion walking alongside with us. So there's somebody else that wants this solar project to happen as much as we do, then we can usually find solutions and have, had great working relationships with the state agencies, with the federal agencies, and, the local government. These types of projects are, present so many opportunities for a win-win and multiple benefits that it's usually worth seeing them through.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more. Very well. So we have lots of landfills. We have, I think you said 63 gigawatts worth of landfill potential here in the United States. That's a lot of gigawatts. And yes, there are some challenges because landfills are often built three-dimensionally. They build a mound out of the waste pile, and so there's slope to the landfill and what you want to solarize, and there are limitations there. I'm curious, though, there are some products that come to mind, like Earthos, which is flat-to-earth solar. Certainly on that south, east, west slopes, you could do flat-to-earth potentially. Have you looked at systems like that?
Yeah, we have. And usually it comes down to the economics of the project. And, is there sufficient incentive to support things that are a bit outside the box or, maybe have higher costs. Again, I'm always, we're a small but mighty team. And so we are always looking to build connections and partnerships and relationships. So that is amazing, the amount of technological advances and economies of scale that are gained every year. And, despite tariffs and changes in incentives and taxes and equipment delays in China and everything else, we continue to see these types of projects be more economic to build every year. So I think we will find long-term solutions that will allow us to hopefully build on, increase the developable area and the slopes that we can build on. I know that there are some tracker projects that are now being built on ballasted systems. And I think that could be a big change in the economic drivers, because my understanding is, you can, with a tracker project, you'll use more acreage for the same amount of capacity output, but your production will increase, 30 to 50% sometimes, which has a significant impact on the revenue generation. So if you're not space constrained at a site, but you're interconnection constrained, finding a solution that allows for a tracker system on ballast rather than doing fixed tilt would be a game changer.
Yeah, so just for our listeners, most landfill solar is done with ballasted fixed tilt racking. You have ballast blocks that are, the size of a bookshelf. These are big cement blocks that then has embedded piles that come out of that, and then you attach the racking to that. And that's fine, right, when you have flat or low slope. The problem is when you get a higher slope, because generally the ballast block is being put on top of a pile of gravel to cushion the cap from the ballast block. You don't want the ballast block to sink into the landfill. So anyway, I would love to hear what your team thinks of flat to earth or like a PEG solution where you're creating more of a surface of solar panels. Trackers are great. 94% of utility scale solar is done with trackers in the U.S. now. Trackers swept the market because of the greater LCOE. You get more energy with less solar. And now there's some counterbalance to that with these flat to earth or low to earth, where there's less steel, less racking, or no racking in the case of earthos. So look forward to
absolutely. It's and that's the demand that goes hand in hand. If there's sufficient demand for solar on landfills, then I imagine those innovators will go out and develop the technology to ensure that it's available, and then those costs will come down. And so that again goes back to the regulators and the lawmakers to ensure that that the legislation that they're putting forth supports these types of projects, and then we'll be able to see them be more and more.
So let's talk about that. Why is landfill solar more expensive to develop?
Well, it's primarily in the engineering, in the EPC cost, the engineering, procurement, construction cost. So the racking can make up a significant, maybe 10 to 15% additional cost. There can be increased labor costs associated with it. I mean, generally, we'll say, like, if we get a quote for a landfill project that's at like $1.50 EPC, we would see essentially probably $1.15 to $1.20 for the same project that's not on a landfill. So that's, and then of course, most of those can be tracker projects, which we don't have. And so the production efficiency is, the output that you have is significantly reduced. I think that it's also incredibly important to point out that when you're developing solar on a landfill, the landfill is the priority. And I think that we make sure that we say that to every single one of our clients over and over and over again. The landfill is under compliance. They are subject to regulation, and the job for those that are overseeing the landfill is to ensure that they keep it in compliance and they maintain health and human safety. And, as you started when you said, drinking water, leachate, I mean, all that's happening at a landfill. And a landfill may be contained and quite benign, but if it's still under post-closure care, which most of them are, you need to be prepared for what might happen anytime over the next 20 years. And so we need to build solar in a way that it's complementing the remedy, the compliance, the regulation, and allows for the landfill to remain the priority. And that can be sometimes a bit of a challenge for a solar developer, because they want their multi-million-dollar facility to be the priority, right? Understandably. So it is building a long-term partnership to figure out how can we operate and maintain the landfill closure and have a successful economic solar project.
I mean, it sure seems to me like a lot of the expense, the higher expense of these projects stems from having to use ballasted solar. So maybe there's a way to innovate around that and move away from ballast blocks altogether. That would be, I think, because the ballast is potentially a threat to the landfill cap also. But I'm no landfill engineer, so we'll have to see how the engineers see these no racking solutions. Right. Because there is a benefit of, vegetation control is a major thing for these landfills also. You don't want woody material growing on the landfill. That's going to punch holes in the cap. Mm-hmm. Woody roots are very tenacious. They will go through just about anything. And so the landfill operator is having to do maintenance, do vegetation control. And if you can have very high ground cover ratio with solar panels, that's going to greatly reduce the amount of weed control or mowing or whatever you're doing, right, to control the vegetation.
And that is another good kind of segue just to mention another benefit for these landfill owners is that the solar facility will take over responsibility for a good chunk of that operation and maintenance. So beyond just the benefit of, lease revenue or even, being able to divest of the property entirely, You can also have some reduced O&M costs. So the ongoing mowing, snow removal, visual operations, security fencing, those types of things are often responsibility that's borne by the solar developer.
Yeah. I'm curious if you can give us a read on land lease rates, because for greenfield solar here in the Midwest, lease rates might be $900 to $1,200 a year per acre. Okay. Which is very good for a landowner who's traditionally cropping that land. Okay. They might be making $300 if they're renting their land. So a landowner can triple their income by renting their land or leasing their land to a solar developer, which is why it's not that hard to get landowners interested. It's hard to get the other things, the interconnection, the permit, etc. But when you're approaching landfill owners, what are the going rates there?
So we quote our lease rates in megawatts, but again, I can do that math from, as I said, it was about 4 acres per megawatt. But I think that the lease rates can be comparable. There are, again, somewhere like Illinois, obviously lease rates in Illinois are much higher than lease rates in Ohio, because we have a program in Illinois that can substantiate the assumptions.
Yeah.
So going into, an initial proposal, I can make some assumptions about how many megawatts I'll install, and that is to be confirmed through interconnection. So it is impossible to know without having gone through the interconnection process how many megawatts you will actually be able to build, because it's the utility that will confirm capacity that's available, as well as upgrade costs and the timeline to complete the upgrades. So the unknowns, the things that really differ are related to the cost to build, as you mentioned, but there may be some incentives that come in and offset that. So like the state of New York, for instance, they have an actual landfill adder. And so that landfill adder can help offset the higher costs. There are also, some investment tax credits, benefits for certain projects that might qualify. There are Brownfield, the Energy Communities Adder, which has a section for Brownfield, which unfortunately eliminates more landfills than it benefits. But there are some that can get that additional tax credit. And if you secure that tax credit, it makes for a very economically attractive project.
So is the SCIA working on that fix, or what? Yeah, I was very curious to learn that the IRA did not necessarily accelerate landfill solar development.
No, and that's why we call it the solar coaster, because it's all these ups and downs, right? So there was a pretty brief moment after, August 2022, when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, where, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be able to develop solar projects across the United States. Like, I don't need a state program anymore. The federal incentive is going to be sufficient. And then, of course, I worried that I would have so much competition because everyone was going to want to be a landfill developer. And then I realized that they actually didn't include most landfill sites. So it very clearly excludes Superfund sites, certain municipal solid waste landfills, any CERCLA or regulated EPA sites. So the short answer to that is no, I don't think there is going to be a fix to that. I think that it's unfortunate, because those are the type of sites that, really need them. And especially like the example I gave, where there was in New Jersey, where there was $3 million worth of back taxes that hadn't been paid. You really need a robust incentive program in order to kind of dig out of that hole and make that site economically attractive.
So in Illinois, we have Illinois Shines, and then we have a parallel universe known as Solar for All, which is targeting low and middle income and also, I think, brownfield. So when you look at your work in Illinois, are you strictly working within the Solar for All program?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And we've really moved aggressively into Illinois. We've found that the program structure, I mean, just to say, I think that all community solar programs are generally competitive. And so that can be an issue because there's usually more demand for the incentive than is available.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be frustrating because if the goal is to get as much renewable built as possible, we should be allowing the projects that are viable to move forward and get the incentive. Let's build it all this year instead of putting it out over, doling it out over the next 5 or 10 years. But it is overall a very good program. The interconnection process in Illinois is sufficiently transparent. It's definitely becoming quite saturated, especially in the Ameren territory. But there's some, we have excellent projects that are under development that I think are, going to be quite impactful to the communities that are around them. And we're just so excited to hopefully see them move forward in the next couple of years.
So let's close this out with what are the benefits to a local community, right? You've got a landfill that is a cost center for whoever the owner is. Let's just assume it's a municipal closed landfill. Today they have a cost center that they have to maintain. Tomorrow they're getting some income by leasing the land. They're greening the grid locally and regionally, right, with a phenomenon like community solar. So it's good for, in the long run, it's good for the environment, greening the grid, less coal and natural gas, electricity. And then there's tax income for the taxing bodies. In Illinois, I think we have 16 different taxing bodies. It's an amazingly long list, but what, in your mind, what are the short list of benefits that I haven't already identified, and how do you sell this to local communities?
I mean, I think you hit the 3 important ones and kind of obvious ones. I think that what we've recognized in the last year and are really excited to continue to pursue and work with communities on are the additional community benefits. And one thing about these landfill and previously contaminated sites is that they were often sited in economically disadvantaged communities, and there is this overlap of environmental justice issues with the availability of these projects. And so I think that these solar projects can bring community benefits beyond just the reduced electricity costs and serving low and middle income families, but there could also be ways to tie in work through the environmental justice programs and working with the local communities to find out what else can be done or how can this project be designed in a way that supports the community. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you want to share with our audience? And this could include, authorities having jurisdiction or elected officials, county officials, of course, my energy professional audience, but what else should people know that they may not know about landfill solar?
Well, I think that it's really a call to action. I mean, just to bring it full circle to where we started, we all have these sites in our communities and they are often overlooked, and people prefer to maybe ignore them and not think about them, but we should be telling our communities to go out there and develop them. And, there are companies like AC Power and others that want to help build community-driven clean energy projects. And I think we should, if we all go out there and push and say, hey, that old dump down the road or that, dilapidated property would make an excellent candidate. So tell your municipal leaders.
You might be wondering, how do C&I solar PPAs get financed? For many, it remains a mystery. For others, there's Conductor. Conductor Solar helps hundreds of developers and EPCs find investors, close transactions, and collaborate effectively. With competitive bids from high-quality partners, Conductor makes sure you and your customers get the best PPA deal every time. Free to use for developers and EPCs? Visit conductor.solar today. Very well. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify. That is the best thing you can do to grow the show's audience. And tell a friend about the show. We love word of mouth recommendations, and reach out to me. I love hearing from my listeners. You can do that on LinkedIn or via the website, cleanpowerhour.com. Annika, how can our listeners find you?
Well, you can check out our website at acpowerllc.com or follow our page on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter on our website.
You'll also be
at a lot of conferences.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'll be coming to Midwest Solar Expo here in May 20th to 23 in Chicago. So if you're listening to this, this episode is going to be probably in March of 2024. But so check out Midwest Solar Expo or any of the RE Plus the RE Plus regional events, of course. So lots of opportunities to press the flesh with developers like Annika. Thank you so much, Annika. Let's grow solar and storage.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, listeners. This is Tim. I want to give a shout out to all of you. I do this for you twice a week. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time. I really appreciate you and what you're all about. You are part and parcel of the energy transition, whether you're an energy professional today or an aspiring energy professional. So thank you. I want to let you know that the Clean Power Hour has launched a listener survey, and it would mean so much to me if you would go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on the About Us link right there on the main navigation. That takes you to the About page. And you'll see a big graphic, listener survey. Just click on that graphic, and it takes just a couple of minutes. If you fill out the survey, I will send you a lovely baseball cap with our logo on it. The other thing I want our listeners to know is that this podcast is made possible by corporate sponsors. We have Chin Power Systems, the leading three-phase string inverter manufacturer in North America. So check out CPS America. But we are very actively looking for additional support to make this show work. And you see here our media kit with all the sponsor benefits and statistics about the show. You know, we're dropping 2 episodes a week. We have now over 320,000 downloads on YouTube, and we're getting about 45,000 downloads per month. So this is a great way to bring your brand to our listeners. And our listeners are decision makers in clean energy. This includes project executives, engineers, finance, project management, and many other professionals who are making decisions about and developing, designing, installing, and making possible clean energy projects. So check out cleanpowerhour.com. Both our listener survey on the About Us and our media kit, and become a sponsor today. Thank you so much. Let's grow solar and storage. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chinpowersystems.com to find out more.